firm recently settled a case for a total of $40 million. That was $20.5 million to the family of the decedent, the family that we represented, that Matt and I worked for, and then $19.5 million to the family of another woman who was in the same car who was catastrophically injured. Matt and I worked on the case with our friend Naveen Ramachandrappa. And the basics of the case are that it involved damaged guardrail. So it involved a section of guardrail that was beat up so badly that when our client's car crashed into it, the car vaulted over it and was damaged when it struck a pole on the other side. If the guardrail had been fixed, that wouldn't have happened. And all this was the fault of three entities. The first was the Georgia Department of Transportation. And the way their sovereign immunity works is why the amounts are slightly different for each family. And then two contractors with the Georgia Department of Transportation, or GDOT. All of them were basically doing nothing, allowed this guardrail to sit damaged for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And so we're about to show you an animation that we used for the case. But before we do that, I want to give a little context. On a lot of cases like this, we'll work with an expert called an accident reconstructionist. And basically, they investigate a collision and help you show what happened. And this is what the final product was. Thank you. So this is just a little introduction to kind of orient the jury who would have seen it to where the collision happened, which was on 85 South, right between downtown Atlanta and the airport. That's a view that a driver would have had approaching the damaged guardrail. And here is what our expert believed happened. So instead of redirecting the vehicle back into the roadway as a guardrail is supposed to do, it vaulted it up and flung it into this concrete pole, which killed our client and severely injured the driver, who was represented by another lawyer. And one of the ways we were able to get these specific locations that all of this happened was from our accident reconstructionist, who did a download of the car, an event data recorder, which we call an EDR, which has all sorts of information about speed and angle, the angle of the steering wheel. And so he used that with physical evidence from the roadway to sort of project where the vehicle went. Now here, this is an interesting scenario. It illustrates our expert's opinion about what would have happened had there been a functional guardrail. And as you can see, it just hits the guardrail and then goes right back into the roadway. And really, this is what should have happened. And we were able to find another driver who had hit the same area of guardrail just a few months before this collision, while it was still damaged but not totally flattened like you saw in the photo earlier. And he just suffered from a sore back, and his car was fine. And so he walked away from the collision.
We tracked him. Where did y'all find him? In like Minnesota?
Minnesota, yeah. Nick and I flew up to Minneapolis to take his deposition in the middle of winter, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'd add about an animation like that is it's expensive. Like they're very useful in that It helps a jury to see what happened out there, and I think it's helpful for working to witnesses too. You can show a witness that and say, hey, is this how it happened? And most of the time, if you got it right, they'll say yes. But a lot of lawyers don't do it because they cost a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
How much did we pay for that one? Do you remember?
I don't remember exactly. I want to say in between $50,000 and $60,000, but it's money well spent when you can show a jury an illustration of an expert's opinion, particularly when just listening to an expert talk about physics and math might be a little boring.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to talk a little about defenses. See if you can get that to show up on the screen on the left there. I bet you it has something to do with closing Chrome. But so obviously in a case like this, there's a lot of money at stake, and the defense isn't just going to admit what happened out there and admit that it was their fault. So in this case, there were GDOT was one defendant, and then there were also the two contractors. One of them had the job of fixing Guardrail when it was damaged. That's Martin Robbins, based out of Lawrenceville, Georgia. And another was Arcadis, which is an international engineering company. And Arcadis' job was to go around the Atlanta area and identify guardrail that had been damaged. And then once they identified it, they were supposed to tell Martin Robbins about it so Martin Robbins could fix it. Now, one of the defenses that Martin Robbins came up with was that allegedly they were just too busy to do their job. Martin Robbins had signed this contract with the Georgia Department of Transportation saying that they would fix the guardrail when it was damaged. They didn't say that they wouldn't do it if they were busy or any of that. They just said they would fix it. But then they didn't do it, obviously. And in this litigation, they said, oh, well, we had so much to do that we couldn't get everything fixed in time. And so what we're going to do is cut this video now. We'll put it in another part where these exhibits are working. We're now back after having fixed a technical issue. When Martin Robbins claimed that it had been too busy to fix the damaged guardrail that it was told about, we went digging a little bit. Matt sent an open records request to the Georgia Department of Transportation, and we learned that at the same time that Martin Robbins was claiming back in the summer of 2018 that it was too busy to fix this damaged guardrail, they were actually bidding on new projects. In other words, while they're saying they're too busy to fix this guardrail within 21 days, as they were contractually obligated to do, they were at the same time asking GDOT to hire them for new and additional projects, and saying they had all kind of capacity to do that. On the background behind us here is one of the documents that they submitted as with one of these bids, one of their many bids, this in January of 2018. And at this time, Martin Robbins Fence Company, you can see it stamped in the middle of the document there, says that their current capacity for new work is $8.5 million. This is signed by their president, Tommy Martin. You can't tell the signature there, but we cross-examined him. He admits that's him. And then it continues. So this collision happened in June of 2018. That's when they claim to have been too busy. Well, here's another one of these capacity averments or statements, again, signed by Tommy Martin here. And this is under oath, by the way. Here he says his current capacity is $13.8 million for new work, just 2 months before this collision happened. And then here, just about 12 days, a little bit over a week after this collision happened, on June 13, 2018, they're still saying they have excess capacity, $13.8 million. And then well after the wreck in September of 2018, Martin Robbins was saying under oath by the signature of his president they had $17.8 million of extra capacity to do work. So we thought that pretty well killed their defense. And judging by the fussing the defense lawyers did, I suspect they privately concurred. Another defense, we saw this from Arcadis. Arcadis said, well, it might be true that we were going to check for damaged guardrail, but there was no timeline on that. So I suppose Arcadis was implying that this international company could just see the damaged guardrail and then sit on it and look at it, for a couple months and not do anything. So we went digging through the documents again. I think this also came from GDOT, and we found this. This is meeting minutes from March of 2018, about a little less than 3 months before this collision happened, where they reached some conclusions. And we'll zoom in a little bit here if I can. And here they say that the folks from Arcadis are supposed to compile a spreadsheet daily, every day, of damaged guardrail and then send it to Martin Robbins on the same day. So all of that looks pretty bad because really this guardrail sat damaged with nothing being done for a long time. How do we know that, Mr. Khan?
Yeah. So this was one of my favorite parts of the case. So, Google Earth is a really fun way to see what's going on in your neighbor's backyard, but it's also really useful in the context of litigation. And so we used Google Street View images dating back to 2007. I think actually the earliest one was from 2017. But
Yeah.
we have these images, time-stamped images of the guardrail showing it in a non-functional condition and worsening over time. And so, of course, we showed these Google images to every witness that we could and got them to admit that it was non-functional and that it had been worsening. And just a little aside, there's a manual that governs the work that these contractors does that says if a guardrail is 3 posts, is the picture behind me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the manual says that if a guardrail has 3 broken or separated posts, that it is designated as non-functional. And as you can see, it doesn't really take an expert to see that there are at least three posts that are completely separated from the guardrail. So
And this is back in
Yeah.
2017, and then it gets, appreciably worse, as you said. Here, you keep talking, I'll keep pulling up images.
Right, yeah, and so that was from 17. Here's January 2018, which is about 6 months before the collision, and it's almost in that flattened state that you saw from the first photo, which was taken exactly 1 month from the fatal collision by Martin Robbins. And so we used these Google images to just show that both of these big companies were sitting around doing nothing. One of them claiming that they were too busy while bidding for more lucrative construction contracts, and the other just not doing its job.
Yeah. Yeah. From our perspective, it was a great case, and we had a great time working on it and hopefully making some changes in the way that guardrails get treated in the metropolitan Atlanta area. But you don't ever want to lose sight of what it really was, and that's the tragic loss of life of a mother, and a daughter, and a sister, and a friend to many. And that was Catrice Hunter. So we were honored to work on the case on behalf of her family and happy we could reach ultimately what was a $40 million settlement on the case. Of course, nothing replaces the loss of life. And our heart goes out to our clients who are now growing up without a mama because of what these companies didn't do.